Some days begin like any other and then end as the day that splits your life in two. For me, it was a Tuesday. The morning felt ordinary. Coffee brewing, sunlight stretching across the kitchen counter, the faint sound of birds outside the window. I remember thinking how normal it all was, how safe. I had a steady job, a husband with charm enough for both of us, and a marriage that looked perfect enough in photographs. But that illusion shattered at 3:15 p.m. when my manager called me into his office. He used words like downsizing and realignment, but what he really meant was simple. You're finished here. 10 years of loyalty, late nights, missed holidays, all reduced to a polite handshake and a cardboard box. By the time I drove home, my hands gripped the wheel so tightly they ached. My chest felt hollow. Still, I clung to one fragile hope that David, my husband, would comfort me, or at least pretend to care. The house smelled of rosemary and roasted chicken when I walked in. For one brief second, I thought maybe he had cooked to soften my day. But then I saw the catering bags. Voices floated from the dining room, David's friends laughing loudly. He spotted me and raised his glass. "Everyone, this is my unemployed wife." The words cut deeper than a knife. His friends shifted uncomfortably, but David grinned, clearly pleased with himself. Always said the corporate world was too much for her. Guess I was right. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, sipped her wine and added sweetly, "Some women just aren't meant for responsibility. Nothing wrong with that, dear. You're better suited for other roles." Other roles. As if my worth had been erased with a single stroke. I forced a polite smile, but inside, shame burned hot in my chest. That night, while David snored peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling. His words replayed in my head like poison. Unemployed wife. Not cut out for responsibility. Book club. For years, I had excused his arrogance. I told myself his jokes were harmless, that his pride was just how he coped with his own failures. But lying there in the dark, I finally understood the truth. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as disposable. Tears slid into my hair. My father's voice echoed from long ago. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. I had ignored the signs for too long. Tonight, I couldn't. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, harsh and unforgiving. David hummed as he shaved, as though nothing in the world had changed. At the kitchen table, I sat with untouched coffee, my mind whirling. He came downstairs, kissed the top of my head like one might pat a pet. "Don't worry, babe. I'll take care of us. You don't have to worry about the big stuff anymore." Arrogance dripped from every word. But I didn't argue. I simply nodded, memorizing his smug reflection in the window behind him. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. One day, he would see exactly how wrong he was. One day, he would learn that the woman he mocked was far stronger than he ever imagined. That was the day everything changed. The weeks after losing my job passed in a blur of forced smiles and heavy silence. I tried to find my footing again, sending resumes, meeting with recruiters, but the rejection emails piled up faster than hope. David, meanwhile, thrived in my weakness. Every dinner became a stage for his cruelty. One night, with Eleanor and his sister seated at the table, he raised his wine glass and announced, "Anna's joined the ranks of the ladies' club, shopping, reading novels, and waiting for their husbands to come home. Not bad work if you can get it." Laughter rippled around the table. I kept my eyes on my plate, the roast chicken blurring in front of me. Eleanor patted my hand. "Don't take it personally, dear. Some women are meant to support, not lead. You'll be happier if you accept it." Their words clung to me like smoke. I excused myself early, retreating to the quiet of the guest room. My reflection in the mirror stared back, tired and hollow. Is this who I am now? David's cruelty didn't stop at home. At gatherings, he introduced me as between opportunities, his tone sharp enough to draw polite chuckles from strangers. He exaggerated every story, how I struggled with technology, how I once burned a roast, small embarrassments twisted into public comedy. People laughed. I smiled weakly. Inside, I shrank smaller and smaller, but each time, something inside me shifted too. The more he tried to erase me, the more I began to notice how much of myself I had already hidden away. One Saturday afternoon, Eleanor cornered me in the garden. The scent of roses filled the air as she looked me up and down, her voice dripping with pity. "You should let David handle the serious things now. You've done your part, Anna. Maybe it's time to step back. Focus on being a good wife. Leave the future to men who know what to do with it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. She smiled, satisfied, and walked away. But when she was gone, I gripped the fence post until my knuckles turned white. I thought of my father's lessons, of the patent tucked away in files David never cared to read, of the strength I once had before I let this house drain it from me. Maybe I looked defeated. Maybe they thought I was finished. But deep inside, a spark flickered, small, almost invisible, but alive. That night, while David boasted to friends in the living room, I sat alone in the study. The shelves were lined with books we never read, contracts we never revisited, and forgotten folders gathering dust. I pulled one down and opened it, fingers brushing across my own signature, my invention, my idea, my name. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not a wide smile, but something steadier, quieter, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. Not completely. I closed the folder, slipped it back onto the shelf, and returned to the noise of clinking glasses and careless laughter. They thought I was weak, but I knew something they didn't, and that knowledge was enough to keep the spark alive. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky looks heavy enough to collapse. I was clearing dishes when the doorbell rang. 2 men stood there, David, perfectly pressed in his gray suit, and a lawyer I'd never met. They carried a leather briefcase and the smell of arrogance. David smiled thinly. "Anna, let's make this easy. Just some papers to sign." The lawyer laid out the documents on the dining table. Property division, debt responsibility, a clause that waived any right to support, all tilted in David's favor, every line dripping with injustice. My throat tightened. This isn't fair." David's smirk widened. "Fair? Life isn't fair, Anna. Sign and you can move on. Refuse and I'll make sure you leave with nothing but regret." The lawyer didn't meet my eyes. His pen clicked, steady and cold. I wanted to scream, to hurl the papers across the room, to tell him about the patent, the money, the truth he'd never imagined. But instead, I sat down. My hands trembled as I lifted the pen. Every stroke of ink felt like surrender, like erasing pieces of myself. But deep inside, beneath the shame and humiliation, another thought whispered, "Not yet. Not here. Not like this." When I finished, I slid the papers back. David exhaled, satisfied. "Good girl," he muttered, already packing them away. "Good girl." The words echoed like chains tightening around my chest. "Din sound." That night, I cried until the pillow was soaked. It felt like death, like burying the last shred of dignity I had left. But when the tears finally dried, something changed. In the silence of the dark, I realized that what I had signed was not the end. It was only the stage being set. He believed I was beaten. He believed I had nothing left, and that belief was the very thing that would destroy him. In the days that followed, I moved into a small apartment. Friends whispered about my downfall. Some avoided me altogether, embarrassed by the scandal. David, of course, flourished in the story he had crafted, bragging that he had moved on, that he was happier, freer, wealthier without me. He paraded Madison through restaurants and bars, her laughter sharp and hollow. Let them laugh. Let them believe. Because while they celebrated, I quietly began to gather. Every receipt, every account, every detail he thought I'd forgotten. I stacked them carefully in folders, each one a thread that would one day weave into a net strong enough to catch him. When Eleanor called to gloat, her voice dripping with satisfaction, I listened politely. "I always told David you weren't strong enough," she said. "You never really belonged in our world. Now you can finally accept your place." I murmured agreement, even thanked her for the advice. Then I hung up, my heart steady. They thought they'd won, but I knew better, because defeat is only permanent if you believe it. And I didn't. Not anymore. The first weeks in my new apartment were silent. No clinking glasses, no mocking laughter, no footsteps echoing down the hall. At first, the quiet felt unbearable, like a wound that wouldn't close. But then, slowly, it became something else. Freedom. I unpacked one box at a time. Between sweaters and photo albums, I found the folders I had tucked away. Contracts, bank statements, credit records. Each sheet of paper was more than proof. It was leverage. David thought I was gone, that I had nothing. He was wrong. Dana called nearly every night. "You can't keep this secret forever," she whispered. "You have to show them what you're really worth." "Not yet," I told her. "The longer they think I'm weak, the stronger I become." She sighed, but she didn't argue. She knew me well enough to hear the steel in my voice. Meanwhile, David's new life sparkled on every screen. Photos of him and Madison on balconies, in cars, in restaurants, designer clothes, luxury hotels, champagne. To others, it looked glamorous. To me, it looked desperate. Money burned faster than he could replace it, and I knew some of the accounts still carried my name. One mistake on his part, and he'd pull me down with him. I couldn't let that happen. So I went to Scott, my advisor. We sat across from each other in his downtown office, the glow of his monitor lighting the room. "There are 3 open credit lines," he explained. "All joint, and Anna, one of them is deep in debt." My pulse steadied. "Freeze them, everyone." He hesitated. "You're sure?" "Yes." My voice didn't waver. "If David wants freedom, he can pay for it himself." Hintamas. Inoidakoris. By noon, the signatures were done. The accounts locked. Repayment demanded. I walked out of the bank with sunlight on my face, the air sharp and new. My phone buzzed before I reached the corner. "David." "What the hell did you do?" The message read. I slipped the phone back into my bag, my lips curving into the faintest smile. That night, I sat at the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker against the dark. For the first time in months, my heart was calm. He would rage. He would demand. He would try to corner me again. But I was no longer afraid, because storms don't announce themselves. They gather quietly, and when they break, nothing is ever the same. The cafe was warm and bright, sunlight spilling across polished tables. I chose the center seat where no one could mistake my presence. My coffee arrived, dark and strong, and I waited. 10 minutes later, David walked in. His suit was perfect, but his eyes darted nervously. He dropped into the chair across from me, fists tight. "You froze the accounts," he hissed. "Undo it." I stirred my coffee slowly. "Why would I? You're spending money that isn't yours. That stops now." His jaw clenched. "You always were ungrateful." The bell above the door jingled. Madison walked in, her heels sharp against the floor. She froze when she saw me, then forced a smile as she slid into the chair beside him. I nodded politely. "Good morning, Madison." Her cheeks colored. David shifted, uncomfortable. The silence stretched until I leaned forward. "You've both enjoyed yourselves," I said softly. Trips, clothes, champagne. But here's the truth. Those debts are in my name too, and I won't carry them for you. David tried to sneer, but his voice cracked. You don't have the power to... I reached into my bag and set a thick envelope on the table. The sound was quiet, but it silenced them both. Inside were notarized documents, proof of the patent, proof of the sale, $97 million. David's face drained of color. Madison's lips parted, her painted smile collapsing. This was mine before you, I said evenly. By law, it belongs only to me. You have no claim, David. Not a penny. He shook his head. You're lying. Check with my attorney, I replied. Every signature is there, every transfer, every dollar. Madison's hand slipped from his arm. Her voice trembled. So, you've had this all along? I nodded. And while you celebrated, I was preparing. The credit freeze is only the beginning. Every reckless choice you made is now yours to carry. David's composure cracked. You can't just walk away. I stood, smoothing my jacket. Watch me. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared. Two people who thought they had broken me, now realizing I was untouchable. Thank you, I said softly, for teaching me what freedom really means. Then I walked out, leaving the envelope and them behind. The morning air was crisp, the city alive with motion. Each step away from that cafe felt lighter, as if the weight of years was finally lifting. By the time I reached the courthouse steps to meet my lawyer, I knew the truth with absolute clarity. I hadn't just survived. I had won. The courthouse was quiet, its marble floors echoing every step. I sat at the long wooden table, papers spread before me. The judge's voice was steady, detached, as he read through the agreement. Line by line, the marriage unraveled. David sat across the room, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He looked smug, certain he had won. I signed where my name was called, calm, unshaken. When the judge declared it final, David leaned closer, smirking. Don't spend your little savings all at once, he muttered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Outside, sunlight poured across the courthouse steps. My lawyer pressed a manila envelope into my hands. Inside was confirmation. The transfer completed, the numbers clear, $97 million, mine alone. I folded it carefully, as though it were more than money. It was proof that I had never been powerless. That evening, I sat in my small apartment by the window. No glittering chandelier, no catered meals, just me, a cup of tea, and the quiet hum of the city. I thought of the years I had lost, the nights I had cried in silence, the humiliation I had endured. Tears welled in my eyes, spilling freely, but they were not the tears of defeat. They were release, because I had survived, because I was free. In the months that followed, news drifted in about David and Madison. Trips canceled, creditors calling, arguments spilling into the open. Their glamorous facade cracked under the weight of reality. Meanwhile, I rebuilt in silence. Meetings with Scott. Careful investments. Choices made with patience and clarity. Dana teased me on the phone. When are you going to tell the world? Show them who you really are? Not yet, I said with a smile. Let them believe their story a little longer. One night, I stood before the mirror. The woman staring back was no longer hollow-eyed or broken. Her gaze was steady, her lips curved with quiet strength. I touched the glass gently, as though greeting a friend I'd lost long ago. Tears blurred my vision, but this time, they carried no shame. I whispered to the reflection, to the woman I had become, "You made it." Later, I stepped onto the balcony. The night air was cool, the city alive with lights. I closed my eyes and let the breeze wash over me. For the first time in years, my heart felt light, and as the stars shimmered above, I breathed the words that had been buried inside me for so long. You thought you broke me, but I was only becoming whole. And so, Anna's journey reminds us all that even in the deepest betrayal, strength can be reborn. She lost her job, her marriage, her place in the world, yet she found herself again. The core message is simple. Your worth is not defined by who leaves you, but by the courage you carry inside. If you've ever felt broken, remember, you are not finished. You are only becoming whole. Thank you for walking with Anna's story. May it remind you that freedom and dignity are always worth fighting for.